Hi, my name is Robin, and I'm gonna talk about like a tutorial about my final projects today. And it's basically a project inspired by Rosa Menkman, and then it's about kind of like glitch or deformation, which you could see like up here. And then because a lot of her work was like applied a lot of like human faces and then adding glitch effects upon that. And then for here, I was pushing it a bit further. So I was building this 3D model in Blender, and then I import it here as an OBJ, and then adding kind of like another layer of mechanism or technology upon that, and then adding kind of like glitch effects upon the 3D modeling thing, and then adding hand tracking interactive to that. So for this tutorial, we'll be basically focusing on the hand tracking part of this project, which is where you could see in the bottom part of this interactive thing. So basically, it's like a hand tracking graphic pattern following your hand and then detect what your hand is doing to kind of like animate the graphics within those. So basically, to do this, the hand tracking interaction of this is basically the workspace would basically look like this, which is pretty simple to do and achieve once you understand like the logic connecting all these things together. And we could start with Scratch over here. So we need like a clean workspace, and then we're gonna first drag in our media pipe text, and then also the hand tracking top that we have, connecting it also to our media pipe. So for this, I'm just gonna choose the FaceTime, and then as you can see here, there's a lot of different plugins that you can use, and then for this project, we're just going to use the hand tracking. So we could turn off the detect faces, landmarks, hand poses, objects, images, and everything else. So just leave the detect hands as it is. So as you can see here, we could already see our hands being detected from MediaPipe, and that's working pretty well. So but we're gonna like leave that part as it for now. We wanted to like do the design part first, so we're gonna start with adding a circle top, and then making it into parent panel size, and then 32-bit flow. For this first circle, so we want to kind of like the radius to be a bit smaller, and then with no fill, but only the border of it. So for here, we're gonna add a bit of the border width to kind of like see it, and also we're gonna make it into a white border so we could see it better. And we're gonna copy and paste it so that we have a second circle, which is kind of like we wanted to create that a bit of offset of the first circle, so it has like two borders around the central graphics. So here we're gonna add just a little bit on the radius of the circle, and then for the third circle, we're gonna copy and paste again, but for this one, we're gonna drag the fill alpha back to 1, and then we don't need border for this one. So, and for this, we're gonna make it a much smaller circle that exists in the middle, of the whole graphics. So kind of like that. And then we also need to copy and paste it again here to create that star-like pattern that we want to create. So here we're gonna kind of like narrow it down by the X radius here. So you might want it to be something like that, and then make it just a bit shorter so that it exists in the whole big circles like this. And then after that, we're gonna copy this 3 times. So we have 4 different narrow circle, like ellipse that we have. So here we're gonna rotate it by 90 degrees, and then these for 45 degrees, and the last one for negative 45 degrees. Okay, and so let's see how it looks by putting them into a composite. So we could drag it in, like link all different like these ellipses into the composition, and then we're gonna change the operation into over so that we could see all different 4 ellipses kind of like exist together instead of like one on top of each other. And then we can see that it's looking quite nice. And then we're gonna add a transform after this, and also for these we're gonna add a composite to this as well, like these 2 circles. And always remember to change it into over so that's kind of like nice. And then also connect a transform after this, so same thing that we did before. Like that. And for this filled circle, we wanted to add like a glowing effect onto that, so we're adding a bloom after this, and then you could adjust how it looks or how glowy you want it to be by simply dragging these bar or kind of like this as well. So we want to leave it as it is for now, and then we gonna put these all together here, and then also drag this far apart away, and then also drag this transform onto here. So here is our design. So now the design is set. So now we have to like draw data from this hand tracking panel like this, and then we're gonna do so by adding a null after this. Oops. So like in here, there's a lot of data that we could draw from, like different position of different fingers. So you could see X and Z, and then up there there's Y. So because we want the whole circle to stay in the middle of our hand, so we're gonna select out. Kind of like an easier way of doing this, I'll be just using the mid finger because it's kind of like the middle of the whole hand, right? And then so here we're gonna pick middle finger tip Y, and then for this we're gonna pick middle finger tip X, and then we're gonna add a math to it so that we make sure that everything is from 0 to 1 from this range, and then also so like the range would match kind of like the positioning of the whole circle. And then after that we're gonna add a lag after this to make sure that the movement is fluent, like how the circle moves is going to be more fluently animated through this lag drop. And then after that we're going to connect it with the null so that we could use that directly into our transform tab, which is this translate X and Y panel over here. So we're gonna do so by drag X into the X translate and then Y to the Y translate. So like now you could see it moving, but like you could see that this circle, it doesn't, like it never reaches the left bottom corner or any of the left part of the screen basically. So that's where we have to rearrange kind of like the center of the circle. So by doing so, we're gonna add times a -1 for the X operator, and then plus 0.5. And then this, for the y, we're just gonna simply do minus 0.5. That's what it's doing is kind of like it's flipping the axis, and because right here it's 0, 0, so in total the panel is kind of like 1 in length and in width as well. So we wanted to to make sure that it reaches the whole screen, we have to pull it to like the corner of the whole screen from the center part. So like now, as you could see, it's working pretty well and following your hand, basically. Just like that. Yeah. And also because we wanted to apply kind of like a transform rotation animation on this star-like pattern. So we wanted to animate this rotate panel over here. So by doing so, we have to drag another set of data from this hand tracking tab. So again, we're gonna pull a null from this third panel. And then here, as you could see, there is also a lot of data we can use. And because we want it to be like when you pinch in kind of like detecting the distance between the finger that you use to pinch to animate the rotation aspect of the circle. So we wanted to use the H1 pinch midpoint distance over here. So we're gonna select that channel all again by using a select. And here we're just gonna select the hand 1 pinch midpoint distance. And because we want to rearrange the data that we pull from our hand to kind of like attach it to the rotation degrees. So in order to do that, we have to connect it to a math chop. To change the range of the data. So here we could see that when we pinch, the farthest distance is probably like 0.6 or something like that. And then when we're not pinching, it's basically like 0.05. So we're just gonna put 0 to 0.6. And since we want the whole thing to kind of like rotate, and the data should be kind of like from 0 to 365, because that's kind of like how rotation works. And then we're just gonna put from range 0 and 0.6 to 0 to 365. And then after that, we're also gonna add a lag to make sure everything is fluent. And then we're gonna add a null after this so that we could directly pull data from here. And after we did that, basically, we're just gonna do drag this data to this rotate panel and select chop references. And now I could see that when you pinch your fingers together, it's kind of like rotating. And you could see that there is a bit of a transition between the stop point and the start point as well, because we put a lag after the math. But I think it's kind of like rotating a bit fast, because 365 degrees is a bit more probably. So we're gonna change it by doing maybe changes to kind of like 200, and let's see how that looks like. So now it's kind of like rotating in a good way. So like a fluent and then not too fast, not too slow speed. So like, okay, so like here you could see that as you pinch, it rotate, and then it will follow your hand doing this, and then you could like rotate while you move. And another thing that we could do is that we could add a glowing effect on this bloom top. So by doing so, we could see that by scrolling this bar, it's basically like doing the glowing effects, and also this as well. But for this project, we might just want to use the bloom threshold. So we're gonna animate that. So we can see that the desirable range of the data is might be like from 0 to somewhere around 0.05. And we could rearrange our data by kind of like apply another math in here, and then using the same data that we drew from the midpoint distance. And then for this math over here, we just gonna do, because we said that it's probably a range from 0 to 0.6, and then for here we're just gonna make it to 0.05. And then also, like we did before, we're gonna add a lag after this, and also a null. So now we could apply that data directly to our bloom threshold, like that. And then, as you can see now, not glowing, glowing, not glowing, glowing, is doing pretty great with the data right now. Okay, so now that the design is done, so we wanted to check if it works well with our camera turned on. So we're gonna add a video device in here, and then make sure that the resolution is parent panel size. And we're gonna again connect it to composite and drag it far away here to kind of like connect that transform into it. And make sure first the operation type is on over, and then the transform is above the camera so that you could see it both. So like here, you could see it's working pretty well. Yeah. And here it's like a great effect of kind of like using hand tracking to kind of like animate different graphics that you made in TouchDesigner. And in my project, as I shown before, I was also using hand tracking first to control the graphics, and then kind of like give the people a bit of instruction on the graphics of what they're doing with the interaction, because that's kind of like a clear way other than text to kind of like tell the audience how they want to interact with the system. And I was also kind of like using a thumb up. So in my project, I was using kind of like two hand detection. So to do that, basically you could just like drag, because we were like like using hint one here, but like in here you could see that it's actually there is hint one and hint two, so you could use both of your hands, kind of like animate different components in TouchDesigner. So in my projects, I was using the first hand, like a thumb up. So if a thumb up is detected, then the feedback would be triggered. So you could also do that by kind of like connecting the gesture data to the pulse function in feedback. So that's a really good way of kind of like showing interactivity through hint tracking, and it's pretty efficient. So, and the second hand, which is what we are doing like here, is what we're like doing here. This is kind of like the second hand in my own project. So this is gonna be the instruction aspect of it. And then by doing so, there's a lot of different approaches and diversity that you could dive into through hand tracking, because it's really efficient for using, and then it could create so many different interactives within just connecting different data to different panels by doing it like super easily. Yeah, and basically that's the end of the tutorials. And if you wanted to explore hand tracking more, there is so many different ways that you could do it. And then I hope you guys like the video and then enjoy the tutorials. Thank you all for watching.